All right, welcome into Gridiron Icon this week. And I must say, this is a special week. We have a very special guest. But before we get to him, welcome to my partner, number 88, Mr. Preston Denard. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing quite well, my friend. How are you? Long time no see.
I know it's been a crazy summer. It's been a crazy summer. Thank you to all our loyal listeners and watchers out there. Football
Yes.
season is coming. We'll get into some of that gridiron stuff. But tonight we got something special, a little something different with some very inspiring stories and background. Mr. Denard, please introduce us to your friend.
Well, I am more than excited to do that. Very dear friend of mine. I met a good handful of years ago. It's kind of unique in how we met. But one of the things I do want to say is this. Stacy, you know how you've always thought to yourself, you've always wanted to meet somebody out of the ordinary. And out of the ordinary means every day we're attracted to the same things that we're attracted to. It's comfortable. It's the people we want to be around. And sometimes when we allow ourselves to just reach out and just take in our surroundings, whether they're unfamiliar grounds or not, you find a diamond in the rough. That's what our guest is tonight. Agrippa Williams was born in Bridgeton, New Jersey in 1950. He received his early musical training and the tutelage from his father and his sisters. His father was the late Reverend Stitt Williams, a founder and director of two family musical groups, the True Tones Gospel Singers and the Silver Stars. Now, everybody probably is asking themselves, okay, this is a sports show. Well, you're going to find out there's a whole bunch of sports. He's going to tell us about this little thing I have in my hand, which I know he knows well. And there's some individual stuff that he's done when he was in high school. A graduate of Bridgeton High School in Bridgeton, New Jersey. He received a full scholarship in field from Maryland State College. He went on to enlist in the United States Air Force in 1970, and he served as a security specialist during the Vietnam War just before being honorably discharged. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to put our hands together for a great gentleman who's going to share some wonderful stories with us. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Agrippa Williams.
All right. Wow. And might I add how appropriate this is.
Oh, he's crying already. He's crying.
I like it. We just had Memorial Day, and first and foremost, thank you for your service, you and your family. Amazing.
A very unique young man. We're going to shut up and just introduce him to our audience because he's got so much to talk about. Agrippa, why don't we just start from the beginning, my friend? When you were born, I'm sure mom and daddy said, that's something special about that one right there. Tell us how that journey started.
Well, it was the 1950s was a different time.
Yep.
I'm the youngest of 11. There was 6 girls and 5 boys, so a lot of competitions. That's why I'm used to the competition, Preston. Okay, I grew up with it. But a lot of competition.
You're the baby?
Yes, I'm the baby.
You're number 11.
Yeah, I'm number 11. I was the last one. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was a good spot sometimes, and then it wasn't, because when you're a baby, nobody wants to watch you, and you spend a lot of time playing by yourself, the child. But it was wonderful. I had a great family. I had a lot of things that talk about my father, who was, he wasn't a regular father, okay? I have to say this. All the time I spent with my father, up until his death when I was 15 years old, every moment was like a teachable moment. Every time we were together, he was telling me things and instructing me on things that I need to incorporate into my life. And I shouldn't even say this, but when I was born, I was in a crib. I slept in a crib in my parents' room until I was 12 years old. My father would talk. Yeah, every night he would come and tell me stories about the family history, things I thought he told my other brothers and sisters, but I found out years later that he hadn't. So it was really interesting. Yes. My father, Reverend Stitt Williams, my sister had called me in 1995 because she was trying to locate him in the census report. And so she said she called all my other brothers and sisters, and no one knew anything, couldn't find it. And I asked her, I said, well, what name are you looking under? And she said to me, what you talking about, boy? I said, well, you know, you're not going to find it under Stitt Williams, because Stitt was not my father's birth name. My father's birth name was Partea. It's an Indian name, Partea.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And his sister, Aunt Bill, we called her, Willa Mae Oatman, her birth name was Pocahontas. So they changed, they changed their names, because back in those days, my father told me, say, son, it was hard enough living in the world being colored, but being colored and Indian was unbearable. So they shedded all the Indian names, and I mean, they did. And my father took the name Stitt from a Protestant minister in Richmond, Virginia, when he was 16 years old. And that's where that name came from. And when I told my sister, she didn't believe me until 2 years later when she found the census report, the 1904 census report that showed my father, his brother. Hey, he had a brother named King Agrippa Williams, where my name Agrippa comes from. And it was quite interesting. So she started asking me all kinds of questions about the family, because I didn't know it, but I had all the family. My father told me, so he kept me afraid. I was a frightened child. I will say that to you. I was, because my father told me things. I don't think if I knew, I would have even told my children, but he was the kind of guy that I think he knew he was going to be passing, and he didn't have much time. So he used his time just sharing things about how I should treat people, what I should look for when I want to get married to a woman. You know, I'm 10 years old, and I'm just like, wait a minute. I didn't like girls at the time. But one day, coming from church in Springtown, New Jersey, my father pulls over in the car, and I thought I was getting a whooping, because back in those days, they didn't talk to you unless there was something up.
Right.
Yeah. You know, so he pulled over. I was expecting him to pull out his little black book, because my father kept a little black book on all us boys. And whenever we got in trouble, he would write stuff down. You know, and nothing happened. No, we didn't get a beating, and we're cool. You know, 2-3 weeks go by. You know, he got 2 or 3 things in a book, and for the minor infraction. And one day I came in, and I accidentally just was hurrying in, and I ran past him, and I scuffed his shoe. And he said, "Come here, boy." And I knew I was in trouble because of the tone of his voice. He pulled out his little black book and said, "You remember 2 weeks ago when I told you not to go to the old man field, and you went up there, and remember I told you to get out there and dig that yard up, and you took a day to do it, and And so he said, well, it's time to go out and cut your switch." Because we had to go cut our own switches before we got a
Oh yeah. Get the belt, get the spoon, get the switch.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I loved my father, but boy, I was afraid of him. So it kept me out of trouble, because I mean, I respected the police, because I was more afraid of my father than I was of the police or anything. I mean, that's how it was. We were like considered his ambassadors. So when we were out the house, everything we did came back to him and mom. So it had to be something good. He didn't want to hear nothing negative. So he pulls over in the car as we're coming from church one day. I'm thinking I'm getting a whooping. And he just looks at me and tells me how proud he was of me. And I'm like shocked, you know. And I said, well, "What, Daddy? What'd I do?" He said, "You know, son, one day you're going to donate a part of your body to save a life of a complete stranger. And I'm so proud of you." Oh, why did he tell me that? I was
Whoa.
fear came upon me in such a way, I started stuttering. I stuttered for a number of years after that conversation. Until I was about 14 years old, I was a stutterer. That's the way it was. I was so
Wow.
afraid because I thought that something was going to happen to me and I was going to end up taking my body and saving the world. I'm going to save the world with my body or something. So I always had that fear. But he went on and just told me that, I was going to one day raise my grandchildren and I was going to rescue people. He said, just as scared as you are right now, son, one day you're going to be one of the most bravest men that ever walked the face of the earth. You're going to save people. You're going to help people. And I'm just like, I couldn't see it. I didn't believe it. But looking back now, everything my father said has come to pass. I'm 51 years old in Seattle, listening to a conversation between my wife and her friend talking about this guy dying. And I guess it was, I figured he needed a kidney because what they were talking about, he was on it for 3 years on dialysis and nothing matched. He had this kind of rare blood and B positive, which that's my blood type. And I knew that because on your dog tags, they have that stamped on the dog tag, what your blood type is.
Interesting.
And so after the conversation, I spoke to my wife, who was a nurse, Linda Marie, and I told her, I want to meet this guy because I think I got a kidney for him, and I know it's going to be a perfect match.
Wow.
My wife was saying like, hey, it don't have to be a perfect match now because they have medicine now that they can use to keep it from actually rejecting and stuff. But I told her, no, I want to meet him. So I met him. I actually thought he was white because my wife is white, Caucasian, and her friend who was telling the story was Caucasian, and they were talking about a friend that they both knew who I had never met. So a week later, William Pearsall come to the condo, and it was like, he was a brother. I was like, oh, shit.
Oh, you can do that. You can do it.
I was totally surprised. So I told him this, the story about my father, and he was kind of reluctant. And so he kind of just like went on to say like, well, if it doesn't match, you can put it up on a national directory, to help somebody else. And I would say, no, it's not going to happen like that. If you don't believe me, you don't think it's going to work, you don't. He said, no, I'll call Virginia Mason. He called him, set up an appointment. I went down there. They took 8 little vials of blood, and like 7-8 weeks went by. I'm driving across the Ballard Bridge here in Seattle area. I get a call from the transplant nurse.
Okay, before you go on, there's one thing that I know this story. You got to tell the audience how hesitant Bill was because he had a couple opportunities beforehand. Go ahead and tell that part of it.
Oh yeah, well, he had a sister who was going to donate, and the day before she was supposed to donate, she changed her mind. So he was really,
That's tough.
It hurt him. And his wife at that time too, she came up to me because before the operation, the doctors takes you through and it shows you, take the marker and marks on your body where they're going to go in at, that new Da Vinci system, they're going to go here, and bring it out and your what do you call it, your panty line or your belt line where they're going to take the kidney out. It was very scary. And I had issues with needles. At that time, I did not like being stuck with needles at all. So I had an agreement made with the hospital that my wife, who was a nurse at the hospital at the time, that she had to take my blood. If I had to give blood. Oh yeah, because I went down there for one. When they took those 8 vials, this girl was sticking me 2-3 times, missing and hitting and missing. And I was like, oh no. And so when I told my wife about it, she spoke to them and they agreed to allow her to do it because she was painless. I mean, I don't know the gift she has, but I'm just like, okay, baby, I'm ready. She said, oh, honey, I'm done already. You know, I'm like, oh, okay. But the whole situation came down to when I made a mistake and I mentioned to the hospital about what my father told me, that one day I was going to donate a part of my body. And they were like, oh, is this kind of a religious thing? Are you being coerced? You know, but we can't do it. I mean, they have these rules that they can't do stuff if they feel that you know, it's based on this kind of stuff, you know.
Wow.
So
really?
they actually was going to cancel it. And I asked to speak to a
Really?
psychiatrist. Oh, yeah.
What
I
in
don't
the
know if I told you
world?
that. But I asked to speak to a psychiatrist, Patricia, I forget her last name, and they agreed that she's the only one that could clear it. And I spoke to her. I mean, I told her stuff like I'm telling you. I went back to when I was born in the crib. I told her about my dad and everything that went on and the stuff he told me and all this kind of stuff. By the end of that, it was about a 2-hour meeting. She was in complete tears, crying. She gave me a hug and said, for some reason, Agrippa, I believe every word you said. And she okayed it. That's how it was able to happen. So on November 21st, 2001, my friend John Sharifi, who worked for ABC News, he wanted to do a story on it, The Gift of Life. So they were actually in the operating room and they filmed the whole thing. I saw sort of in recovery where they was taking my kidney from out of my room and taking it to the room with Bill Pearsall, you know, and that was a life-changing event.
Yes, it was.
How did my father know? You know, and that's what
Wild.
always had gotten to me was the stuff he told me that was going to come to pass, has come to pass. He used to say to me all the time when he took me places and I met people, son, you've just been in the presence of greatness. And one day that's going to count. You're going to be around a lot of great people. And here I am now with Preston and you, Stacy. I mean, I'm serious. People sometimes, I mean, the people I met through you, Preston.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a list of them written down here I could go through. I mean, you know, Howard Jackson, Don Woods, Bruce Herron, Robin Cole. I mean, Hollywood, Ricky Ellis, Ron Brown, Mar Fleming. My
Wow.
boy Bryson Manor went to the high school. He played
Bryson,
for the
yeah.
Denver Broncos. He passed away. And Franklin Masters, you know, Michael Merriweather, Raymond Caldwell, and the Caldwell family. You know, that went to, there were a lot of people I met through you that have been in my mind, and there still are. They're great people,
Yeah.
all of them, you know, and every time I'm around them, that's why I like to go to LA and play golf with them and take their money when I can, you know,
Well,
because because I get something from it.
yeah.
There's always something positive. But I know you want to say something here, so
Well,
go
I
ahead.
need to throw
We're
something
going
in.
to talk about our track.
Well, we're gonna do that. I'm gonna pass the baton here in a minute. But
Okay.
what Stacy doesn't realize, and our listening audience, is this young man, Stacy, does not fly. He doesn't do a bus. You're not gonna Uber him. He is gonna drive everywhere in this God's great
What?
country.
Really?
And
Yeah.
he always, hey, I went on a celebrity, I went on a celebrity golf tournament trip with him to San Antonio. Lord have mercy. It was the last trip I took driving to San Antonio
Oh,
with
no.
Agrippa because he drives everywhere. He comes for our golf tournaments in Albuquerque, New Mexico, from up northwest.
What?
He will
Wow.
also drive to the East
Yeah.
Coast. He said, hey, I'm going back to see some old college and high school
yeah.
classmates. I'm going to swing back through and come down. You're going to be in town? We can go golf. This whole thing started out, though, after meeting him at this big event that truly was falsely represented to me when I found out the true investor in this was my dear friend, Mr. Williams. We formed a relationship that is just one of those things you just never plan on, and it's here for life. And you're listening to, and I'm going to let him talk. You're listening to a poet. You're listening to an author. You're listening to an orator. You're listening to a singer. You're listening to someone who can deliver a speech in a drop of a hat. And he's going to cover a couple of his poems in this interview.
Oh,
but
yeah,
he's a man that is unique in his own likeness. And so as he continues on to talk about his story, how he met all these people on the golf course. I got him on the celebrity circuit. This dude hits a 300-yard drive. This man could knock a putt from 40 feet out. He's hit an eagle shot. He's hit birdies. He's a great golfer, but very unique because he's not a former NFL athlete. He's not an NBA guy. But let me tell you, you put whatever ball in his hands, he can do it. Agrippa, why don't you share with the audience one of your talents you got, your favorite poem? I love hearing.
Yeah, I mean, a poet, a golfer, and a poet. I mean, this is a Renaissance man. Let's be honest. Okay,
well, hey,
hit us.
It is.
Your brother. We all have different fathers, and yes, we all have different mothers. And you may not recognize me at all, but I'm still one of your brothers. I pray you understand my feelings so this great friendship can begin. For the words I share with you today, they come from deep down within. Listen to what I say. Ask questions if you don't understand, for I want nothing to be over your heads. I will help you if I can. And if you receive me as your brother, you'll be surprised at what I will say. But if my color still bothers you, please don't let it get in the way. You see, we could still be fighting like the rest of the world and not have any freedom. It's an honor to be an American, and I'm proud of all the things we've won. Slavery was a great test of survival. Those tribulations made my people strong, and now we can adapt to any climate or situation. It doesn't take us blacks very long. Slavery brought the best out of my people, but its scars all Americans must wear, for no one can turn back the hands of time if they wanted to or even if they cared. You see, my heritage is a part of this great country, and this no one can change yet. Many will hate me because of my color, but I'm an American just the same, and no murder, hatred, or prejudice could ever change this one important fact. It's an honor to be an American, and you know, I'm very proud of being black. So speaking as a black man, I can say that we've all come very far, and you too must be proud of your heritage, no matter what color you are.
Love it.
Very nice.
Oh, very nice.
Wow.
A singer, an actor, all the different things. Why don't you just lead into the acting part now? Tell us about that side of it.
I mean, I got divorced in 1986.
Oh.
So I was married 16 years to my first wife. And so I wanted to do a lot of acting and stuff, but we had 3 kids, so I put it off, and I kept putting it off. And for a while, I kind of blamed my ex-wife. When she divorced me, I realized it wasn't her fault at all. It was mine. I mean, it's just the truth. I agreed, and I did what I did. And when I realized that, I mean, I went to New York to wait for the divorce to take place. And, well, 86, let me start with the beginning of 1986, because 86 was a powerful year. In January, I was working in a Stovall Care Center. I was activities director. And to have, you know, things for the clients and the people there, I started writing poems. And on Friday morning, I would do a little thing with the poems and stuff. Wow. And one day we were watching the current event when the Challenger took off.
Oh, yeah.
And it exploded. And I mean, it was very monumental. There was a gentleman there who came up to me afterwards because people say, "Oh man, people talk about that God made this happen." And you write all these poems. You doing any current event stuff? You ever written a poem? I hadn't really. And so I went home that night after watching President Reagan speak on TV about it, and I lay down. And at 12 o'clock, I woke up in a cold sweat and got up and wrote a poem that was titled, "They Had That Special Grace." On January the 28th, 1986, 7 astronauts boarded Challenger 7. Some were on a quest for knowledge, and others were living out their dreams to explore our vast heavens. We all saw what took place on that day as the Challenger climbed in the sky. Dick, Michael, Greg, Judith, Ron, Ellingson, and Krista, they all died. Krista felt strongly about living out dreams, be they on land or in outer space. And President Reagan, he said it so well. They all had that special grace. If they could report what they see now, we all would take the next flight, for they truly are exploring the depths of space, for they have all journeyed to another life. It was a lack of communications that took their lives. A grave error was made that day, and no one understands the hurt the family feels because it didn't have to happen that way. I can still see their faces as they all waved goodbye, not knowing the weather had become too cold. And when the investigation has all been completed, we'll all know what caused it to explode. You see, the dreams were not just for themselves, they were for all mankind. And they've shown us the risk that goes with dreaming, for accidents do happen sometimes. See, God did not destroy the Challenger, and this I know is true, for it was a mistake that took their lives, and it could have happened to me or to you. Now, their lives have been taken away from us, but their dreams no man can rob. And though one door has closed, another has opened, and they're all in the hands of God. I wrote that poem, sent copies down to Houston, and I got invited to the high school where Krista McAuliffe taught at in April of that same year, '86. So I took my wife at that time and 3 other singers from our church, flew to Boston, went to Concord, New Hampshire, and did a special performance for her she was a social studies teacher for her class. After we did that, they asked us to stay and do an assembly for the whole town. So we stayed until that evening, and the whole town came, and I did that poem again. And when I was doing the poem, I was supposed to stay on the mark because they were filming it, but I got carried away, as I do sometimes, and I ended up on stage right. And when I finished the poem, I realized I had left my mark, and her social studies class was in the front row. They all ran to the stage. Mr. Williams, how did you know? And I'm thinking they're talking about the poem, because I had stuff in it that hadn't been found out yet, And so I said, I don't know. She said, no, it's not about the poem. Said, take a step back. And I took a step back. And when I stepped back, I looked where I was standing was the 2 footprints of Krista McAuliffe. They had wood burned in the state. That was the last spot they saw her stand before she went to NASA to went to Houston for the flight. And so, that was chilling. So that kind of like changed my life. So I come back from April and May. My wife put in for the divorce. I go back to New York, and I'm living in New York. And me and my brother had some issues because, like I said, we're very competitive. And so he ended up kicking me out of his house. And I probably never told you this, Preston, but for like 3 months, I lived on the streets.
Oh, wow.
Changed my life forever. Thinking back, I think God wanted me to know how to understand things better, because I used to preach and help people. And I found out it's easy to have faith It's easy to be positive when you got a refrigerator full of food, roof over your head, money in the bank. I mean, it changed my whole life and how I look at people, and the things my father was teaching me solidified. So I leave in August to come back because the divorce is in September. I go to the airport, JFK, and American Airlines flight 1220. Get there, and it's like, oops, sorry, you're going to have to, we overbooked. So you might get out maybe tomorrow, or we have to see.
Oh, no.
And I'm sitting there looking at the thing where there's a flight, 1212. It's leaving like 10 minutes after my flight. Put me on that one. Oh, no, that's a charter flight. I use that S word again. And a lady was standing behind me, reached over my shoulder and tapped me on the shoulder. And then she told the lady working behind the desk, put him on our plane. It was Sissy Houston, Whitney Houston's mother.
What?
That's when I met Whitney. Oh, yeah. That was the change. I flew on that flight. She was doing a concert in Denver, and she had a whole, her family. She was young then in '86.
Yeah.
She was really young, and her mom was part of her team. Her brother was a manager then. So I had some of my books with me, and so they liked my poetry. But I share my whole life. Like when I start talking, you see what happens. And I was telling what I was going through, and her mother prayed. Whitney, they like ministered me all the way back, and she told me something that my father used to say all the time. He said, "Don't worry about time, son. Think about moments, because life is a bunch of moments put back to back, back to back. It's the moments you have to concentrate on." And so Whitney was saying the same thing, just like, say, look where you at. I mean, this moment you have here in time is special. And you're going to have more of these moments, more of them. And 2 years later, she comes out with the song. I mean, it was a song that was, was written by, let me get the name here right, John Bettis and Albert Hammond. They wrote it for the 1988 Olympics. That's what that song was written for. I don't know if you knew. One Moment in Time was the theme song for the Summer Olympics in Seoul, South Korea. Wow. And I've always, if you listen to those lyrics, it was like the conversation that we had on the plane. Give me one moment in time.
Wow.
Thought I could be when all of my dreams are a heartbeat away, and the answer is up to me. I mean, it was like, wow. So that was a special moment to me. That was life changing. And so I come back. I mean, that was the moment where I couldn't go back to New York because divorce didn't take place until December. So I ended up staying and ended up going to Alaska. When I went to Alaska, that's when I officially started using my middle name as my first name, because I used it a lot after my father died, because he called me by my middle name the night before he died. And the first acting job I got, professionally acting job I got, was an off-Broadway play in Anchorage, Alaska. And I got to co-starring role. And that's when I got a little talent here, and that started spinning off to where I met all these wonderful people. I got invited. One of the state senators in Anchorage was on the board, was the Black Caucus, and they were having a big convention down in '89 down in New Orleans. And she asked me to come and be like the opening act for the 4 days, before the main speakers came on. Brian Gumble was the one main speaker who was on. I got to do my stuff for him. Bill Cosby, he was the keynote speaker. And the last one, the one that was most important, was Coretta Scott King.
Wow.
I met her.
Okay.
Oh yeah, because I had written a poem that was basically, it's called Martin's Last Dream. So I got to perform that poem for her, and
Wow.
she loved it. And I don't know if you're familiar with the convention center, man. It held like 20,000 people was stuffed up in that place.
Mhm.
So that kind of changed things, and I started meeting. All of a sudden, I got this job, and when I came back to Seattle, ended up meeting Nelson Mandela. That was a life-changing moment, and I'm thinking about my father telling me about meeting all these, in the presence of greatness. I met him as a gentleman in the building that I worked at. On the top floor, had all these expensive condos, and one of the guys there I used to see all the day, Dr. Samuel Samilton, we had a little relationship, talking all the time, and he invited me up to a little, get off work, come on up. I went up to his place on the 14th floor, walked in the door, and I saw Nelson Mandela standing across the room. And he goes over and said, just hold on a second, I want to introduce you to him. He goes over and he comes back to me, man. I'm just almost shaking. And I reached my hand out, and he said, I'll never forget it. He was like, Agrippa, King. Oh man, I was done for.
Yeah.
I mean, I was. It changed my life. And then after that, I got to meet his grandson. I did some Black History program with his grandson, with Naomi Tutu. I mean, it was great. And then I met, during those Black History programs, Ozzie Davis and Cicely Tyson. I don't know if I ever told you that, but they were really big. Ozzie Davis' son, Guy Davis, when I was in Alaska, I bought him in, paid for his hotel and thing, because he was a performer. He used to be on General Hospital, but he was got into drugs, and we got his life clean, and he had a one-man show he was doing. So he came, did a show, but then years later I met his father, so we just hit it right off. And I was doing Paul Robeson stuff, a lot of, Old Man River, all these old songs. And so we had a relationship. And Cicely Tyson, being able to perform, my greatest moment of performing was in front of Ozzie Davis, Cicely Tyson, sitting in the front row.
Wow.
When I did my thing, I mean, I'll never forget it. And they always encouraged me, just the people, just Robin Williams. I did a movie. There's a movie called World's Greatest Dad. I believe it's the last movie he did before he died. There's a spot in it at the end of the movie's ending where Robin Williams made me, I got a little bit more money because I was just an extra, but he made me a feature extra because the camera, he liked my expressions when he was like confessing to all the stuff he did and was lying about in the movie. And so they ran, it was like 30 some seconds of the camera slowly rolling up on me in the crowd. And like, we started a friendship from that. So I used to go down to LA and I used to see him all the time. Oh yeah. He was one of the only actors that could walk the street, and the paparazzi, they respected him. They never got in his face. They never snapping cameras. They didn't do that with him. And there's not too many actors I say like that happened to, but he was. And I had a little, small part in Akilah and the Bee. I was on that, because I had Kathy, my foster daughter. She was saying that, before you go, can you buzz me so I can come down and say hi to Preston?
Everybody loves him. Everybody loves him.
But being in the presence of greatness, and that was one of the things that just kind of like, I mean, all the people, Cephas Witherspoon. I mean, come on, there's all these guys that I've met that are just, every time I'm around you guys, my spirit is elevated. Because you're like fulfillment of a prophecy.
You do the same for us. You do the same for us. One thing I want to make sure that we accomplish, because the hour is growing late. You just talked about Kathy. No. You just talked about Kathy, and I want you to kind of share who Kathy is to you, because that's another uniqueness. And then before we go, I want you to share that story that you shared with me when you were in Vietnam. So start with Kathy first and tell everybody about Kathy, that part of your life. That's another unique thing that took a lot of courage for a man to do this.
Well, when I was working, I was in the early 80s. I was in the field working with autistic children.
Really?
And I learned a lot. Then I got out of it after about I don't know, 8 years. I got out of it because it was hard. But then I got back into it, started working for a place called Industrial Industries out here in the Seattle area, North Seattle. And I got a job. When they hired me, I told them my only stipulation is I want to work with the hardest clients that are in the building. She's like, we got 6 of them that are dangerous, and we can't do that. You're new, and having new people that like to try you. And I said, well, that's what I want. I'm not going to come back in this field and, because if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. And so she said, well, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. So they didn't hire me. And so a week later, she calls me and said, well, Mr. Williams, the gentleman we hired didn't work out. So if you like, I'll agree to your stipulations. And so I came and worked in that field, and I worked with and I turned them around. And there was a lady from the state that was bringing clients to the same place, Industrial Industries. And she said, we got this girl named Kathy coming into the program who's a terror. And at that time, Kathy had one of the highest rankings. I mean, she was dangerous. She was very dangerous back in the day. And so They hired me. So I took the job, I went, and we hit it right off. After a moment where she kind of she cursed at me the first time she saw me, ran to a room. I followed her there. She said the F word, F you. I said, when you get your attitude together, come on out and say hi. I'm talking to the staff at a table. They're giving me information about her. She said, you shouldn't have went to a room. When she goes to the room, just leave her alone. I said, no, I can't do that. And then after a few moments, they're sitting across from me. They stood their chairs out and jumped up. I looked over my back, and Kathy was standing behind me. And she said, hi, my name is Kathy. What's your name? And we were like that. I used to take her to movies. I used to bring her to her condo when I was dating Linda and have lunch and shopping and stuff the other clients wouldn't do because they read her rap sheet. They were so afraid of her. They didn't want her in the same car with them. And so we had it hidden off. But then that's when I decided in 97, I didn't start any of my acting until I was 47 years old. That's when I decided to really go for the movie stuff and the meeting, all those. That started in 97. And I left. I got a call from my boss saying, you ever thought about taking Kathy home with you? I was like, yeah, right. But he was serious. They took a program and looked around the country, took a program, part of one out of Arizona and part of one out of New Hampshire, and started direct caregivers. And Kathy was the first client in the state of Washington to come out of the system and be put into a family. She's the first one. They told me, they gave me 18 months. They said, yeah, you won't be able to do it more than 18 months. And I kind of laughed, but it's going on 28 years now.
Hey, that's what I wanted to hear. That's what I wanted to hear.
So that's how it was with Kathy. When she traveled, all the ball players that I named, 90% of them know her. All the guys, because she picked all those early tournaments. She loved Preston and his family, and she's just a joy, But I want to mention one other thing too. I didn't say, but my greatest time in my high school, because I was a hurdler, and I was fast, My high school record in the 440 it was in yards, but it still stands because they went to meters, I think, shortly after that, a few years later. But my fastest time in the 440 was a 46.7. That was in '69.
Whew.
And my fastest time when I went to Maryland State, there was a shuttle hurdle relay. If I had one more step, I would have won it. But the guy running the third leg fell coming over the third hurdle. I couldn't lead until he tagged me. They were going up to the second hurdle when I started out, and I almost caught him. That year, University of Delaware set a world's record, and we came in second. And I ran my fastest time ever, which was a 13.6. And
Good grief.
at that time, the world's record was a 13.4. Willie Davenport had it.
Yep, sure did.
13.4. So that was, I just wanted to mention that.
That's worth mentioning.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. I know Bryson Manor, remember he mentioned to you about Rick Upchurch?
Yep.
At the tournament, where he was talking about how he used to icky. He said he knew a guy from his hometown named Art Williams that would dust your butt.
Yeah.
I was fast back in the day.
You talking about Agrippa Williams?
I enjoy it. I enjoy the people, the time, and sharing. So if I got anything to give, like you talked about a moment of just want to share something, what I would like people to do, there's a little secret thing I've been doing for the last 5 years. Every year, I pick 12 people. I got some off Facebook that I never met, people in my family, people that I just knew over the years that were having hard times. And each month, one of the people I would just, not much, but I would send them $150 a week for 4 weeks.
Wow.
And I've done that for 5 years. That's why I believe I'm so blessed. And it's like, if I can encourage other people who can afford, you don't have to be that much, or it could be more or less, but if something happens about giving, that I found out living on the streets, and that Bible verse that says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Oh my God, it is so true. Because receiving is so hard, and you never realize that a lot of time when you're like giving to people, but it is really hard. It is more blessed to give than to receive. That's why I like driving to all the tournaments, because I get to meet people across the way. I've helped so many people, strangers, driving to your tournament and other people's tournament that just makes my life complete. And I'm fulfilling my father's prophecy. And that was his thing. Treat everybody right. Love everybody. Because you never know when you're entertaining an angel and you're unaware.
Agrippa Williams. Yep.
Very nice.
That's exactly who he is. And so, the hour has come upon us that we have to bring this episode to a close. But there's so much more in the world about Agrippa. And, we got a couple of minutes. I just think that story, when you talk about an athlete and all that, I just think that story you told me when you're in Vietnam and the challenge that was put forth to you. Give us that story. That'll be our parting shot.
Well, that story is have been placed into a poem. That poem, Welcome Home, and when it came down to it, that's why I did a lot of writing. I wrote a lot of poems over there. I seen all kinds of stuff. People getting up in the morning saying like, oh, it's going to be a bad day. I was like, oh, don't say that. Because those are the ones that didn't come back out the field. But I wrote a poem that I read to myself every morning. It's a short one, and it's called Fear. Fear is a spirit. It's something you aren't able to see. It will only keep you from being the person you ought to be. Its ways are all destructive, so that nothing good will abound. The ways of fear are evil, and they will only pull you down. Fear only breeds more fear, for all things reproduce their own kind. And the enemy will use the fear tactic. He sincerely wants to rule your mind. I've learned much about fear, and the Lord knows I'm not one to boast. But you will be destroyed by those things that you fear the most. And that was, I recited every morning. Now, do I have time to do Welcome Home or not?
Do
I
Welcome
love
Home.
that one.
Do it.
Yeah. That's going to be hard to top, Fear. That was awesome.
Through the 1960s and early 1970s, things got as bad as they could get. There was a war going on in Vietnam, and things were an awful mess. I found myself in Vietnam and learned that war was no game. I almost lost my life, and I still wake up sometimes at night. And my life will never be the same. Well, I made it back home to where the buffaloes roam. Things were supposed to be better, but my wife divorced me. Things got pretty bad. Found myself under some heavy pressure. So I went to visit an old friend of mine, a guy I met back in the war. Went to see him just the other day, but we just can't communicate anymore. Went to Washington, D.C., hoping to meet some old friends, the ones who made it safely home. But when I read the names written on the wall, found many of my friends' names embedded in stone. Went to a party, heard a man telling a joke. He called Vietnam a vacation place, and they couldn't understand why I got so upset and what caused me to strike him in the face. Everyone said, "Hey, what's wrong with Preacher Boy? I never seen him act like this before." But then a vet stood up with tears in his eyes and said, "Hey, you know that brother? He fought in that war." So to all you vets from Vietnam, I pray you can be strong. But if you haven't heard these words before, let me be the first to say, welcome home.
Oh,
Wow, man. That's
good stuff.
goosebumpy stuff. That's goosebump
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I have to ask, Agrippa, as we close this episode, I say it every week, we need about 4 more hours with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But where can is your poetry published? I know we can see you in film, but is there a spot where people can find you?
I had information. I put it on the podcast. I do a lot of time now when I go to tournaments. I take like when I come down to tournaments, I present them signed copies of my
Nice
poems for them to auction off to raise money for tournaments. I found that works better for me because I'm still bashful. It was a long time when I did my poetry, but if you would like anything you've heard, I will make sure you get it. And I mean, that's what I do, But like I've written about 3,000 poems, so I can do those things, And I've been blessed because of the poetry. It's the poetry that's opened the door for me,
You ripped off 4 or 5 poems on this show. Folks listening in, he was not queued up. He just ripped those off. That's incredible memory. I definitely want a copy of Fear. I think that is really profound. I think that speaks to all the kids. And I have some people I love very much in my family that are on the spectrum with autism and whatnot. And I think that poem you gave there would be inspiring.
It keeps people from whether they're wanting to go into business or into the arts or anything. Fear, it's coming in a way to just shut that door. And you can't allow it to, because it just breathes more, But
look at that. He's just reeling off poems here.
That's my friend.
If you don't keep saying, I'll do one more short one if you give me another minute. But
we'll take it. We'll take it.
I'm rich. I must use my precious talent that I have received to help those who are less fortunate and show them in whom I believe. I won't hide my precious talent or bury it under a rock. God gave me this gift to use. No one can make me stop. You may not understand my motives or why I speak like this. I'm not a millionaire by this world's standard, but this gift has made me rich. For each poem I write in truth is a beautiful, polished pearl. You see, I'm rich in ways unknown to this material world.
Okay. Little known fact, I have to insert this right here because it's a profound thing for me, and I'm going to embarrass him a little bit, I'm sure. But when I was a kid, Preston's just slightly older than me, just slightly, people. But I was a guy who liked to write poetry. I couldn't tell you one poem I ever wrote, so forget it. But but I was really inspired by a Sports Illustrated article that featured my co-host. And I cut the picture. I cut the picture of him out. You should have seen. He had this awesome hair, and and he was in awesome shape. But I had it on my wall, and I feel like it, kind of like your dad, Agrippa. In some weird prophetic circular world we live in, I am hanging out with you two guys hearing poems. It's really, really cool.
Oh, he sings too.
That's why he's my
Oh, I know he sings.
Oh, yeah,
No, listen.
That, right?
Oh yeah.
Straight up, we have been cooking in the kitchen, and I put him on Spotify. I found, and not on Spotify. I found him on YouTube. Yeah. His album. Oh yeah, man. We're like getting down.
Hey,
yeah.
Agrippa and I have been on stage together.
What?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
somebody find video of this.
Yeah. Harmony. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes, we. With them.
We need video or audio of this, guys.
Oh my goodness. I got pictures somewhere as I took them in one
Okay.
day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What's going on? Tell me what's going on. He was kicking
okay. Well, it started out. We're really entrapping you. We're going to start a boy band. I'm going to be the dancer. Wait, I mean, we're going places. No, listen, this has been an absolute pleasure. I always come out of our podcast feeling like a richer man, introduced to some of Preston's friends, and this has really been a pleasure, Agrippa. Thank you so much for joining us. Anytime. I love it. We're going to have you back on because I feel like we barely scratched the surface of this guy.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
And I also need to witness you two going at it on a golf course. So that's going to happen pretty soon.
Oh yeah.
But for our
Northwest.
But for our loyal listeners, thanks for joining us this week. It's been a pleasure. A big thanks to Agrippa Williams. And as always, couldn't do this without my partner in crime, number 88, Mr. Preston Denard. Follow us at gridironicon.com, part of the Lioncast Media Group. Find us online at all those social media places. And until next time, a big thanks again to Agrippa Williams. We will see you all soon. Thank you.